those of you folks that may not made the breakfast this morning, I got to introduce Tim Driscoll in the top coat right here. Tim's our Brennan Award winner for the Northampton St. Pat Association, and Larry Costello, our marshal for the parade. Way up here.
Well, for those that don't know me, I'm District Attorney Dave Sullivan, and it's always an honor to come here on this hill and really feel the sense of our two brothers from Ireland who were falsely accused of a murder down in Wilbraham, Mass, and were locked up with no attorney, and with 2 days before the trial were given a real estate attorney to defend them in a murder trial, and they were found guilty as much by the prejudice that existed in the justice system, and certainly not by the evidence, and were executed on June 5th, 1806. We come here today for a few reasons. One is to remember that prejudice and discrimination and those things that permeate our society, that the hate can ruin us as a people, but also ruin our justice system. And so we remember that, but we also remember that Dominic Daley and James Halligan from the gallows forgave their accusers and forgave their executioners. And by doing that, they did something that is so rare, and that is that they set the groundwork for peace and reconciliation in the years to come. And certainly when we gather here today, we want to remember the words that they spoke about forgiveness and about reconciliation. And today we actually have a couple special guests from South Africa and Northern Ireland that have come here to the United States to talk about the process of peace in Ireland and South Africa, the reconciliation that's been brought to both of those places in the world that many doubted would ever happen. But it is the power of love and forgiveness that can change people and cultures, and we welcome you here today. Thank you very much for being here. So I want to introduce the Honorable W. Michael Ryan, retired District Court Judge of Northampton, whose father really kept this story alive and passed it on to Mike and his generation. And we also have a Ryan here that's going to lay the wreath very shortly. So, Mike, if you could give us some words.
I have, the Daley and Halligan story for one reason is it's a terrific story because it's safe. I mean, we Irish, for the most part, face very little discrimination in the United States anymore. We're established, we've made it. And so we can look back on it and do it without, pointing an accusing finger. But the Daley and Halligan story instructs us all on how hatred and mistrust of foreigners or strangers or people who are different, how that poisons society and leads to great injustices like Daley and Halligan did. And we can do it without anybody getting defensive about it, because it happened a long time ago and the Irish are made it now in America. So it's easy to look at it, and there isn't a lot of argument on it, and we can all see it and see the injustice. The next step, though, is we've got to bring it back to today and look around us today and say who is suffering from discrimination, and who's suffering from hatred, and who's suffering from misunderstanding. And and look at ourselves and see that how our communities are very much like those the Protestant community that Judge Daley and Halligan based on one aspect of them. And I think one of the aspects and one of the issues that are present today that we can use Daley and Halligan story to understand is the way that lesbians and gays and transgendered people are being treated in our communities, and snubbed by some and ignored by some. And today it's their struggle. And so I want to tell you about a project that's coming up that I'm participating in. It's April 4th at the Congregational Church in Haydenville. It's a reading of the book of poetry by Leslie Newman called October Morning. It's a very powerful story about Matthew Shepard, who was murdered in Wyoming. I think it was 1998. It's a very powerful story, but she wrote these series of poems about the road that was the boy was taken on, about the fence that held him, about the prosecutors and judges and the mothers and the crowd. and all these poems are being read by different members of the community. It's October 4th. It's at the Haydenville Church. I think it's about 7 o'clock. But Matthew Shepard is like the Daley and Halligan of our time. His story is the story of like Emmett Till, who was executed for whistling at a white woman down in Alabama or Mississippi in 1955. It's one of these jarring examples of what hate does to a community, how it twists it, how it can poison it. And so it's when I read the story of Emmett Till or I read the story of Matthew Shepard, I got to understand it. I see Daley and Halligan. It's just the prejudice is still there. The hatred is still there. It's right under the surface. It's not directed so much at Irish today, but it's still there and it's directed at others. Immigrants, strangers, people who are a little bit different. And if we understand Daley and Halligan and their message of reconciliation, their message of love, we can understand, we can look at these situations and know that the only way that we're going to survive as a community is to put away this poison, to see strangers as our brothers and sisters, to see people who are a little different as members of our family. And that's why we keep Daley and Halligan going, and that's why we are never going to let people forget this story, because it helps us understand ourselves and our communities, it helps make us better, and it's a safe way to do it. So I encourage you, there'll be press about this program, I encourage everyone to do it. I also encourage everyone to resolve in their own lives, to make a difference whenever they see intolerance, to speak out. When you see prejudice, speak up, stand up, take action. Let your neighbors know it's not okay. And once we all start doing that, we're going to live in a safer, happier, healthier world. So that's why we're here. That's what we remember. That's what we're dedicated to. Thank you all for coming. And let's not make this just a once or twice a year that we do it. Let's practice the message of Daley and Halligan, the message of love every day in our lives.
Let's make it short because it's getting cold. But there was just two things that I wanted to point out today. Everybody, I see, everybody's starting to come back, and this is great. What a great crowd we have up here, and we appreciate it. Like, keep it in your mind all year, as Mike had said. But I think the two things that I wanted to point out, I was just at the First Church, and those guests from South Africa and the north of Ireland are here, and they're going to be at the First Church tonight to talk about those things, discrimination and problems, and how they're doing their best to overcome them. But that First Church, Peter Ives just retired a few years ago, and he had a reading in his book, and one of the chapters in his book was about Halligan and Daley and the importance in his life to use the pulpit. And he was at the Protestant pulpit, and Mike Ryan was sitting there, and he was honoring us with his speech about Halligan and Daley. And I think that's so important because that's where it all began, and that's where some of the discrimination and then the unfortunate feelings toward the Irish were at that time, because that's where they were tried. And if we moved in. The other is that we've got the AOH here from Holyoke, and Paul Hogan's here. And the little things that we forget about and discrimination, Mike said it's not, and Dave said it's not really we're discriminating anymore, there's others. But there's little slurs and there's little terms around. And Paul's been running around to Walmart and the rest of it with some of the t-shirts that are really actually disgusting about the Irish. And he's been trying to remove them. So the last remnants of this, the AOH has been making moves to try to take away that anyways in that respect. But, and I honor him. So, I think that's all we have to do today, except for
One more. We always have the youngest part of the clan from either the O'Riordan or the Ryan clan, or wherever it may be. So Shannon is going to lay the wreath in memory of Daley and Halligan. Today, so I'm not going to read the whole proclamation that was given by Michael Dukakis in March of 1984, but it's the 30th anniversary, and I just want to remember John Carlin. He was a retired firefighter who really fought to exonerate Daley and Halligan, and really make sure that this was recognized by the state and that this wrong could somehow be righted. And so I just want to read just part of this. It's a very moving proclamation, but I want to read the part that I think resonates with all of us. We recognize the potential for human error to result in unjust convictions and are constantly striving to improve our judicial system to protect the rights of innocent persons. And whereas the trial and execution of Dominic Daley and James Halligan are reminders that we must constantly guard against the intrusion of fear and prejudice in all our judicial and government decisions, and to resolve to not allow the rights of any racial, ethnic, or religious group to be denied or infringed as a result of such prejudice. And whereas our dedication to truth and justice requires us to recognize the unfairness of the circumstances surrounding the trial in which ultimately led to their executions. And it was signed by McDonagh. That's leadership. That's power of a governor that stepped forward and said that a wrong was done, and as a commonwealth, that the blood that was on all of our hands was going to be wiped away in some way, shape, or form. So before we leave, I want to introduce Father Sean McDonagh, just a great person. His son and I, Joe, went to UMass together, and he's going to close with a prayer. Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Church Scout come together today, and we're mindful that these men are holy men. They were the first congregation for the Catholic Mass here in Western Massachusetts, like before they were hung. And they nudge us all, myself and all of us, for the best of our Irish tradition here in Western Massachusetts, to be with people who suffer discrimination, who suffer disrespect, but also nudge us to be forgiving people as they forgave those who unjustly treated them. May they rest in peace. And may we do what we can to speak up for those who know injustice and hurt and disregard in our day. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for coming.
We do have one tradition. Everybody can gather for one picture.
Okay, we got to.
Hey, let's put Larry. Larry's going to lead us on Sunday. We'll put him right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Yeah.
Right in the middle.
Come on, everybody come up. We're going to nice pushing it. Come, my children. All right, and our visitors. Let's get the visitors front and center. Come on, get up there. I'll be whoever you want. There, you get up. Right up there. Squeeze in. Come on up. We got another row.
Not that cold now.
This is 3 shots at the bar. You'll be nice and toasty.
We didn't get any free ones like you did.
Judy, you gotta look.
All right. Larry's got a lens cover on there.
That's okay.
Let's get one with the wreath. Here, let's hold the wreath out first here. If we can put that right out front. Okay.
I was behind the lens. Ryan.
There we go.
Wait a minute. Okay, now, I want the back of my shirt. It's more.
I thought you were showing the best side.
Thank you. Thank you. And let's see if